Have you ever wondered what would happen if Lady Tamayo refused to help the Demon Slayers? How would Tanjiro and the others defeat Muzan? I mean, could they even defeat him without the help of Tamayo's anti-Kibutsuji drug? The thought of defeating Muzan without Tamayo and Shinobu's drug seems super far-fetched, because in all honesty, that was the only reason they were able to defeat him. If that drug was never made, I have no idea how they would be able to defeat the Demon King. With that in mind, I can only think of one outcome on how this event will play out. First of all, going back to the end of the Swordsmith Village arc, we see the biggest revelation in the series. Nezuko, by some miracle, became the first demon to ever conquer the sun. Through Hantengu briefly witnessing this significant turn of events, Muzan was elated to find out that a demon with the ability to conquer the sun had risen. Now we all know that after this, the Hashira training arc begins. But before that, we see a peek of Tamayo working on a drug that can turn demons into humans, and it was rather successful to say the least. All her accomplishments were made possible because of Nezuko's blood and the blood of the Upper Moons Tanjiro was able to gather. Moving forward during the Hashira training arc, Lady Tamayo was officially invited by the head of the Demon Slayer Corps to help them defeat the infamous Kibutsuji Muzan. Obviously, when the offer was presented to her, she accepted it without any complaints, because we all know how much she hated Muzan's guts, right? But what if she refused to help them? Now that would be an entirely different story. Obviously, Ubuyashiki would be discouraged, seeing how far Tamayo has accomplished many things that could prove to be useful for the Demon Slayer Corps. As we all know, Tamayo played a really huge role in beating Muzan, not just in creating the drug, but during Muzan's attack in the Ubuyashiki estate, she herself laid life on the line so she could personally administer the drug to one she loathes the most. Ultimately, if it were not for Tamayo, Tanjiro and the others would not have been able to end Muzan's reign of terror. Now going back to when Kagaya asked Tamayo for help, if Tamayo had denied Ubuyashiki's request to work together, the anti-Kibutsuji drug would not have been made and Muzan would not have lost against the Demon Slayers. Also, we all know that the anti-Kibutsuji drug would not have been made and Muzan would not have lost against the Demon Slayers. Also, we all know that the anti-Kibutsuji drug has 4 stages. First is the human conversion stage, made to humanize Muzan. Now that stage obviously failed since Muzan was able to synthesize the effect of the first stage quite easily. But the second stage of the drug is what gave the Demon Slayers the biggest chance to defeat the Demon King. Now the second stage is the biological aging stage, meant to age Muzan for 50 years in a single minute. This effect allowed the passage of time to catch up to Muzan's physical body, weakening his healing factor and drastically reducing his speed. The third stage of the drug is the splitting prevention stage, stopping Muzan's ability to disperse himself into tiny little pieces and escape. Lastly is the cellular destruction stage, meant to destroy Muzan's cells and end him for good. Obviously, Tamayo did not create this drug alone, so let's give Shinobu Kocho a quick shout out for helping Tamayo create and develop the anti-Kibutsuji drug. Now, with all that information about Tamayo's noble deeds and accomplishments out of the way, let's focus on the events that would occur if Tamayo refused to help the Demon Slayer Corps. This means Gyomei would not have been able to sneak up on Muzan and land that heavy hit that shattered Muzan's head on the spot. Why? Because without Yoshiro, the Demon Slayer Corps would not have those talismans that could hide another person's presence completely. The type of support is the reason why Muzan always got caught off guard and suffered so much every time he got jumped by the Hashira. Not to mention, Yoshiro was also able to hypnotize Nakime during the Infinity Castle arc. So without Lady Tamayo, Yoshiro would also refuse to help, since we all know he's a super mega simp for Tamayo. But this time, the Demon Slayer Corps is at a pretty significant disadvantage, with Muzan standing in its prime. I doubt he would need the help of the Upper Moons and Nakime in wiping out the only obstacle standing between him and his 1000-year goal. But let's just say that Muzan still got help from Nakime and the Upper Moons. Here's exactly how everything will fall into place. First off, without the drug, Muzan would still be the strongest being there is. Moving forward, as everyone is transported to Nakime's domain, the Demon Slayer Corps is caught in an unending maze that prevents them from reaching Kibutsuji Muzan. With countless demons pouring from every direction, each and every one of them is overwhelmed by the sheer amount of enemies they have to face. Meanwhile, Muzan sits back and watches the bloodbath that will envelop his enemies. Things would proceed as they originally would for a while. For example, Gyo and Tanjiro would face off against Akaza. Nothing would deviate from the original plot, and they would still end up beating the Upper Moon 3 with the same level of difficulty. The same would go for Shinobu, Inosuke, Konosuke and Kanao against the Upper Moon to Doma. Meanwhile, Genya, Sanemi, Muichiro, and Gyomei would also face the same level of difficulty and casualty in their battle against the Upper Moon 1, Kokushibo. These events would obviously piss off Muzan, but in the end, his plan of wearing them out is working rather perfectly. As Nakime continues to move the rooms constantly, keeping the Hashira away from Muzan, the fatigue of fighting countless demons is slowly but surely piling up on the Hashiras. As I said before, the only reason the Hashiras and Muzan were transported outside the Infinity Castle was because of Yushiro. So without him, Tanjiro and the others would never reach Muzan. With no hopes of reaching the Demon King, Tanjiro and the others feel dread as their efforts are being slowly flushed down the drain. As they fend off demons wave after wave, their forces are starting to dwindle slowly. Fear, anguish, and desperation start to take over the entire Demon Slayer Corps as they scramble to find any means to escape Muzan's trap. They were ambushed and murdered by the demons that roamed the castle. Meanwhile, Tanjiro and the Hashiras did everything they could to find Muzan. The closer they got to his location, Nakime would just move the rooms again and again to drain their stamina even further. Even though Tanjiro can accurately pinpoint where Muzan is by using his incredible sense of smell, the shifting of the rooms is just too much. With no way of overcoming Nakime's ability, the Demon Slayer Corps had no chance of reaching their target. Even though they defeated Muzan's lackeys, it simply was not enough. As this cycle of almost reaching Muzan continued, only Tanjiro and the others were the only ones left standing. The other members of the Demon Slayer Corps were already consumed by the demons that plagued every corner of the castle. This heavy blow devastated those who remained. Their morale and fighting spirit were completely crushed because their struggle bore no fruit whatsoever. On the other hand, Tanjiro shouted at the top of his lungs, challenging Muzan. This taunt from the last user of sun breathing was enough to get in Muzan's head. With Muzan's command, Nakime allowed all the remaining Hashiras to reach them. As the room shifted once more, Tanjiro and the others finally laid their eyes on Muzan for the second time. Exhausted and badly injured, the Hashiras and those capable of fighting picked up their swords. Each warrior wasted no time and immediately jumped the King of Demons at the same time. As Muzan laughs at their futile attempt to end his life, he casually weaves through the barrage of attacks, suffering only minimal damage to his clothing and body. All of their swords could not fully reach Muzan due to fatigue from fending off countless demons and fighting against the Upper Moons. But the indomitable will of the human soul allowed them to grip their swords tightly. Their eagerness to defeat Muzan grew even more. The Hashira's despair from failing to protect their master Kagaya Ubuyoshiki and anger directed towards the one responsible for killing their master, along with their fatigue and being on the verge of death, allowed all the Hashiras to finally unlock their Demon Slayer marks, boosting their abilities even more. Much like the Sunrise Countdown arc, Muzan engages in combat against the Hashira and the others, but this time he's never weakened by any sort of drug. At his peak, Muzan was playing against his opponents, savoring every moment of the fight as much as he could. Muzan mocked them every chance he got, which to be honest was quite often. Without any fear of defeat, the Demon King held back so much that even though he could kill them in one fell swoop, he did not. Not because he couldn't, but because the sight of seeing those people who swore to kill him struggle so much made him so happy. However, the decision was about to come back and bite him in the ass. Miraculously, one by one, the Demon Slayers who unlocked their mark started to unlock yet another unexplainable phenomenon. Their swords started glowing red. While Muzan was busy taunting Tanjiro, Gyomei managed to land a heavy blow with his flail, shattering the Demon King's right leg. At first, Muzan shrugged this injury as nothing significant until he noticed that his right leg was not regenerating as fast as it should. Glancing back at the stone Hashira, Muzan quickly figured out what was wrong. Seeing the bright red glow from the stone Hashira's weapon, Muzan knew instantly that Gyomei had reached another level. While the Demon King contemplated this sudden turn of events, Muzan noticed that slowly but surely, almost all his enemies' weapons were starting to show signs of turning into a bright red Nichiren blade, which spelled bad news for him. You see, when Yoriichi fought against Muzan for the first time, Muzan's regenerative abilities were nullified because of Yoriichi's bright red Nichiren blade. Not only that, but in another instance while Kokushibo overcame death by decapitation, his regenerative abilities were also nullified after he got stabbed by a bright red Nichiren sword in a non-lethal spot. After realizing the danger that loomed over his head, Muzan knew that playtime was over. From that point on, he started to take them seriously. Seeing this drastic change in how the Demon King fought, Tanjiro and the others knew that he was on edge. Pouring every ounce of strength they had left, They strengthened their grip and gritted their teeth. Without saying a word, they simultaneously launched a barrage of attacks at breakneck speed and incredible accuracy. At this moment, nothing else mattered. All their focus was on Muzan. Their coordination was at its peak, not moving as individuals, but attacking as if all their hearts and minds were one. For the first time after his fight with Yoriichi, Muzan felt a chill down his spine. As he dodged and weaved through their relentless attacks, the damage he took slowly increased. Little by little, altering his body, Muzan produced whips made of flesh that extended from his arms, back, and thighs. In an instant, Muzan lashed his weapons, completely leveling the room they were in. This move was so fast and strong that none of the Hashira and others were able to avoid it completely. Just like in the original plot, they were all taken aback by Muzan's incredible speed and power. This huge gap in power started to overwhelm them almost instantly. The power-ups they gained seemed so insignificant in front of Muzan's absolute strength. The first of the Hashira to fall was 𝗪𝗁𝗪, the love Hashira. Muzan found her whining quite annoying and took her out first by piercing through her heart. Next were Inosuke, Kanao, and Zenitsu, and they charged to attack Muzan. He quickly countered them with a heavy blow that crushed their organs, instantly killing all three of them with one hit. This scenery plunged the remaining warriors into despair. Meanwhile, after witnessing 𝗪𝗁𝗪, Inosuke, Kanao, and Zenitsu's death, Obanai, Iguro, the snake Hashira, and Tanjiro were consumed by rage. In the blink of an eye, they quickly closed the distance between them and Muzan. With his serpent breathing, Iguro managed to cut off Muzan's whips, and Tanjiro, using the sun breathing technique, managed to sever one of Muzan's arms. Seeing this, Gyomei, the stone Hashira, Sanemi, the wind Hashira, and Giyu, the water Hashira, quickly responded to Iguro and Tanjiro's assault. They lunged forward to deliver their own fatal blows. However, as they got closer and closer to Muzan, they saw him smile menacingly as if he had another trick prepared for them. When they reached the point of no return, Muzan spun the table around on them so quickly and instantly knocked them all back using a violent force. The attack left all the Hashira and Tanjiro incapacitated and barely alive. With this, Muzan had won. None of his enemies were able to pick up their swords anymore. Giyu lost both his arms during Muzan's last attack, while Gyomei suffered a heavy blow to the chest that shattered his ribs and crushed his lungs. On the other hand, Sanemi was still gasping for air, but was ultimately dealt with by Nakame, who had been watching their fight all along. Tanjiro, on the other hand, was kept active so he could witness Muzan consume Nezuko. After eliminating the Hashira, Muzan was able to locate the remainder of the Ubuyashiki family and Demon Slayer Corps and mercilessly annihilate them once and for all. Finding Nezuko was a relatively hard task, though it took him weeks because during Muzan's raid in the Ubuyashiki family's secret location, he managed to slip past them. Ultimately, Muzan was able to track them down, try as hard as he might. Urokodaki was no match against the Demon King. In the end, Muzan got what he wanted after absorbing Nezuko in front of Tanjiro. The Demon King could finally live without fearing death, making him the ultimate being to ever walk the planet. The story might proceed in a peculiar way from here on, but that is it for this what-if theory if the Tamayo did not help the Demon Slayers. If you want to switch things up, why don't you check out what would happen if Muzan was betrayed by all the Upper Moons?